It is a huge honor. Mike, I don't know if you remember this. You were my first podcast interview, and today you're back again at number 200. I think I have the most views and replies and everything from your first interview. You're just a legend. I mean, you've had a stellar career. Your dad was a dentist. You grew up in dentistry. Everyone knows you. Everyone loves your lecture. You've lectured for the coveted Gordon Christian. I mean, Gordon Christian had you lecture for his clinical mastery update annuals that he gives. You are the director of Glidewell. You've made so many YouTubes and podcasts, and I mean, you're just a legend. And now you left the largest dental lab in the world. Some people say Glidewell is about 5% of all the crowns made in the United States. And now you just went to the biggest mega merger on earth. Sirona merged with DENTSPLY. And now it's like something what combined 11, 12 billion annual in sales. And who do they want? Mike, the man DiTolla. So congratulations to a stunning career. What was all that merger about? Did you even see it coming? I mean, a year ago, did you see it coming?
No. I think it took everybody by surprise. I think it took everybody who even analyzes the dental industry by surprise. And I doubt there was, more than maybe half a dozen people on either side who knew that this was going to happen. And so we were getting ready to put on the CEREC 30 meeting this year. And it was about 2 days before, and we were doing some rehearsals with the band and some other stuff. And all of a sudden, all of our phones started blowing up and, vibrating. And everybody picked up their phones, and it was the announcement of the merger on whatever that Tuesday was, like at about 3 p.m. And it was initially kind of shocking because nobody knew it was coming. I mean, you had to be really high up in either corporate structure to have known that this was going on. But I think when you look at it, Sirona is essentially an equipment company that's got a small consumables line. And DENTSPLY is a huge consumables company with a small equipment line. And so it looks like a great marriage between an equipment company and a consumable company. And I think, the market cap, like you said, something like $13.1 billion, becoming the biggest company in dentistry. So that was a surprise to me, but it's kind of neat, from the Sirona side to look at all the brands that 6 months from now when this all goes through and it's DENTSPLY Sirona, it's pretty exciting to look at all the brands that you might be able to interact with. And Sirona, I just think is the coolest company on the planet. They put on the best meetings, do the best education, have the best products, and I was really excited to go and join with them, not even knowing that the DENTSPLY merger was going to happen, to be honest.
Did Jim Glidewell, did he cry? I mean, you were with him for 15 years. I know he loves you like a son. Did he take that okay, or was it like a father-son where he was just proud that you were going to another chapter of an outstanding career?
Yeah, he was. I found him and we sat down together alone in a room, and he was as magnanimous and as grateful as I could have hoped. In fact, more so. And when I sat down and told him, he was very understanding, and he said, the problem is you can't get promoted anymore here. You've gone kind of as high as you can go. And he stopped short, but what he meant was without me just handing you ownership of the lab. And so it was kind of as far as I could have gone there. And I told him I was really proud of how the lab, the image of the lab had changed so much in the last 15 years, from just a large production lab to kind of being the technology leader in the lab industry. And I'll be always so proud of being part of the team that brought Bruxer to the world back in 2009. That was a big deal for us to be able to launch that, and that kind of changed the lab industry. Solid zirconia has really kind of put the PFM down to almost a niche product now for bridges, believe it or not. And it kind of changed the industry the same way that Sirona's been changing the industry with chairside CAD cam. So yeah, Jim was, he wasn't upset. He certainly wasn't crying because he's done very well in this industry. And there's really almost no one employee who could leave that lab and really have it just start spinning down the drain. It's so big now, and the teams are so good that could never happen. But he wished me well, and we shook hands, and he sent me on my way. And had it been me leaving to go to maybe work with Gordon up at CR to maybe take over CR. That would have been different. They probably would have thrown a party for me. They didn't quite throw a party because it was Sirona, and they do compete in a few ways, but he completely understood, and you know, I was very impressed with the nice things that he had to say to me as during that last meeting, and it just showed that he is always the you know, a very generous and understanding person who really is all about building the careers of his employees, even if they have to leave and go somewhere else to do that.
You know, Jim Glidewell is my idol because I'll never, you know, you know, my dad told me, you know, God gave you two eyes, keep one eye on the customer and one eye on cost. And if you don't use your God-given brain to drive down cost, then your customers don't have the freedom to afford what you have to sell. And, you know, back in the day, you'd go to so many of these institutes and they talk about A patients, B patients, C patients, D patients, and you wanted to hang around the right people. And when they describe the A patients, I'd say, there's not one of them at a Farran family reunion. I mean, we're a bunch of Kansas hillbillies. And Jim used his amazing mind to drive down the costs. And people always say, oh, it's cheap, it's cheap. Southwest Airlines is lowest cost, and it's also the only major airline that's never had a plane fall out of the sky. I would much rather try to drive down costs to give people the freedom to save their teeth than to be some elite cosmetic dentist that works on movie stars. And I mean, there's a niche for that too, but I love Jim. I think he's the Herb Kelleher of dentistry. I don't think he's the Southwest Airlines of dentistry, and I just love that guy to death. And I want to score a podcast interview with him because so many people don't know there's a man named Glidewell. I mean, all the lab owners do, maybe 5% of the dentists do, but I think it'd be amazing to put a face. You said that Glidewell competes with Sirona on the deal. Where do they compete?
Well, you know, it's interesting because we embraced CAD/CAM as a laboratory very, very early on, and we fell in love with it at the lab because one of the struggles for a big dental laboratory, whether it's Glidewell or any large laboratory, is it's very tough to keep the consistency across the board from crown to crown to crown, especially when, you know, Glidewell's doing probably almost 150,000 crowns a month now. But in the old days, it was more difficult because every crown was being hand built by a different technician. And so a dentist would, you know, get a couple crowns that he loved, then get a couple that were so-so, and then get two that were awful, and then three that were great, then four that were so-so, and two that were awful. And that consistency drove dentists crazy because they could never predict what they were going to get from the large dental laboratory. And CAD/CAM, instantly, Jim saw its potential to change all that. And now instead of having all the variation that you would get with human technicians, you could set parameters, the same amount of virtual die spacer, the same amount of occlusal offset, the same strength of contact on every crown that you designed, and all those designs would come from software that would optimize whatever anatomy the doctor gave you room for. And because of the CAD/CAM design and manufacturing, all of a sudden the consistency really leveled out, and all of a sudden dentists were able to, you know, to kind of count a little more on the lab. But by the same token, Jim, being a visionary, also saw that the future of dentistry is heading towards CAD/CAM. In other labs, and in Glidewell, it's the present. But he also saw that chairside CAD/CAM was just a great idea and loved the idea of same-day crowns. And so Glidewell purchased a company that made an intraoral scanner and then started developing their own mill. And then they decided just to partner with other companies like the 3M True Definition that has a scanner. And so Glidewell has a mill, the TS150, that'll pair with the 3M True Definition intraoral scanner. So they actually have a chairside CAD/CAM system. And so when dentists say to me, you know, I don't know, labs are never going anywhere, I don't think chairside CAD/CAM is going to catch on. Well, it's pretty telling when the largest lab in the industry believes so much that chairside CAD/CAM is going to start to dominate the landscape that the laboratory comes out with their own chairside CAD/CAM system. So that's kind of where they compete, is they both have a chairside CAD/CAM system.
What was the name of the company Glidewell bought?
iOS. iOS, yeah, like intraoral scanners down in San Diego.
Huh.
And that's actually the company that makes the mill. You know, it's a wholly owned like division of Glidewell called iOS, and they make that mill called the TS150.
And how much is the TS150?
I don't remember, but the combination of like the 3M True Definition and the TS150, I think you're looking like around maybe I shouldn't even give a number, but it's definitely less than other chairside CAD/CAM systems that are out there.
And then you had another major move in that market where the huge Helsinki, Finland planned Mecca bought Dallas, Texas E4D. And so now that's a much bigger company. Do you think that's going to be a player too?
It's hard to say. You know, I've had a chance to play with their newer scanner and see their equipment, and they all work. You know, Sirona's obviously works. The CEREC machine works. The True Definition with the TS150 works, and E4D works. The question, I think, is more about the environment that goes around it. Like, Sirona just has this huge head start on everybody, and they have this community. You know, our friend Sam Purry started CERECDoctors.com. Spear out in your neck of the woods has 6 levels of, you know, CEREC education that they're teaching out there. There's just so much available. In fact, whenever I talk about the CEREC community that exists out there, there's only one other time you've seen a community like that in dentistry, and that's Dentaltown. And so the CEREC community kind of grew up as part of Dentaltown, and then they started CERECDoctors.com. But it's really tough to think about. I mean, look at CEREC 30. It was just last month in Vegas. Tony Robbins spoke there. The band Train played there. Emmett Smith, the running back, played. It was just an incredible meeting. There was 6,000 attendees. There's just no other meeting like that in dentistry, especially one that's just centered around, you know, one technology like CEREC. And now that's going to change. It's actually, we're changing the name of meeting to SIROWORLD to reflect the inclusion of Sirona's other technologies in that. But the community around CEREC is just so huge that it seems like that's what the other companies don't have. And that's more the stumbling block, is to have like local mentors and places where you can go watch videos to see how to use this technology. And so everybody's technology works, all the equipment works, and it'll make crowns chairside. But I think the distinct advantage of Sirona is kind of that environment or that ecosystem around it, where there's just so many users and so many places to go get education on this equipment that you don't feel like you're going to purchase it and kind of be abandoned. So, and everybody else is trying to do that and create that same community as well. And if they're successful, yeah, they'll stand a much better chance of being around for a long time, because it's about more than just producing the equipment that can do this. You know, if you go to the IDS show, you'll see 65 intraoral scanners, another 65 mills. You know, that part is now kind of the easier part to produce those types of things, and they'll work together and make crowns. But it's more about, what do I do once I've invested in this, and how do I get my staff trained, and how do I get trained? And that becomes, I think, the bigger part of the picture.
So, can you mill chairside Bruxer? I mean, are you setting out the blocks to just mill Bruxer instead of the? I mean, the market leader is obviously IMAX, correct? Chairside, Emax.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Emax is still the market leader in terms of block sales, and that's not even combining it with you know, all the Emax that's sold to dental laboratories who are making it for their dentists. And yeah, Glidewell just released. It's called Bruxer Now, NOW, and it's a fully sintered zirconia block, and it can only be milled in that TS150, that Glidewell iOS mill. And the Now, the NOW, stands for no oven waiting, because it doesn't have to go in the oven. It's already been sintered. But it takes about 50 minutes to mill it. And so, you know, it doesn't have to go in the oven, but it spends a lot longer being milled than other current blocks do. So far, that's been the one chairside zirconia block that's been launched so far. But unlike Emax, which has many patents around it, you know, it's very difficult to try to get around what Ivoclar has wrapped up in Emax. Unlike that, solid zirconia, there's really no patents around it. And so, you know, it's kind of like the way there's now 14 different brands of solid zirconia besides Bruxer on the market. And since there really isn't a patent, I think you'll see most of the materials companies in the next, I don't know, year or so come out with the same type block, maybe not the same type of block, but at least a zirconia block that can be used to fabricate a same-day zirconia crown in office.
Now that Sirona, which was a European equipment company out of Germany, merges with DENTSPLY, which is more of a consumables. When I looked at that merger, it seemed like DENTSPLY didn't really have a digital strategy. I mean, they were still selling hundreds of millions of dollars of impression materials and things like that. So it kind of gives them a digital strategy. But I was wondering, does DENTSPLY have a consumable for the CAD/CAM Cirac machine that'll be a block that could be competing with Emax or?
They do. They have a block called Celtra DS, CELTRA, Celtra. And,
Celtra DX?
DS, yeah.
Oh, DS.
DS, yeah. It's interesting because
which division does that?
I've just always said it was from DENTSPLY. I guess I don't know. I'd have to pull it up and look real quick. It's just always struck me as a DENTSPLY product. I don't think it's coming out of Koch. I don't know. I'd have to look. Well, that's the interesting thing about DENTSPLY is that they got so many subdivisions, underneath them. It reminds me of Europe almost, how you have all these different countries underneath it. So, but they all are under the DENTSPLY banner. And Celtra is a lithium disilicate material where you can mill it in a chairside mill. And if you want to stop right there, you can polish it and then bond it into the mouth because it's not as strong in that state. Or you have the option of putting it in an oven, for 18 to 20 minutes where it'll achieve its final strength, and then you can cement it in the mouth. Now it's about the same strength as Emax would be. So you don't have to put it in the oven. You can use it in its weaker state by just polishing it to finish it. But then you have to bond it into place because it's a weaker material. Or you can put it in the oven like you would with Emax, center it, and then cement it. So it kind of gives you both options there.
Is there still a fracture concern with all porcelain? I mean, I don't think there is with Bruxer. I mean, Bruxer really doesn't have any fractures to mention, does it?
No, it only fractures if you get it thinner than 0.6 of a millimeter. Or it only fractures as a bridge material if we don't have enough room in the contact area, like for a posterior bridge to make it 3 millimeters tall by 3 millimeters wide. But it's the least fracturing material we've ever seen in the lab besides, say, cast gold, for example. But Rella and Gordon are getting ready to come out with their 5-year data on their study comparing Emax and Bruxer. And they're still the only two materials out of over 100, Rella says, that they've tested over the last 38 years that have not fractured. And that study will be coming up on the 5-year mark in June, this upcoming June. So they've both performed very, very well. And the truth is, nothing fractures if the dentist reduces enough. And so if you reduce 2 millimeters for a PFM, it won't break. Unless the patient gets hit in the face with a hockey puck or a baseball bat or something like that. But nothing breaks until you abuse it by making it too thin. And that's the reality as we struggled as a lab, and all labs struggle with this, to get dentists to reduce enough tooth structure for whatever material they are prescribing. And so as a result, the solid zirconia ends up being a great solution because even if a doctor's trying to do an Emax crown, and they give you a feather edge margin or don't reduce enough on the lingual cusp, you can always usually switch them to solid zirconia and have it work. But any material, if you prep enough for it, will work. It's just that's the struggle. That's where the reality doesn't meet the theory of whether or not these things should fracture or not.
You're an amazing mind. You always see in the future when you're talking about DENTSPLY Koch, they have divisions like Tulsa Dental Products that was started by my friend Ben Johnson in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They sell direct. Most of their other divisions sell through dealers. What did you think of Jeff Bezos last year saying, Dentistry by Name, that Amazon.com was going to get into the dental supply business and they could deliver everything the next day, and they joined the American Dental Manufacturers Trade Association? Do you think 5 years from now there'll be dentists buying dental supplies from SironaDENTSPLY on Amazon.com, or do you think not?
Well, at the last, actually it was 2 years ago at the California Dental Association meeting here in Anaheim, there was, I saw probably 13 different, I'll call them kids just because they were under 30, but 13 different kids walking around with these black Amazon dental shirts on, walking around talking to people and checking out what was going on. And that was kind of like my first, oh, this is real. This is actually happening. And so I haven't really seen, I mean, I love Amazon. I'm an Amazon Prime member. I ordered something on last Saturday with same-day delivery from Amazon, and it showed up by 9 o'clock that night. That blows my mind. We have Amazon Fresh. We get a lot of groceries delivered to us by Amazon. But those are all things that don't need any explaining to me. So I could see doctors ordering maybe, composite or cotton rolls or, local anesthetic, things like that.
Consumables.
What's that?
Consumables.
Well, consumables that don't need any explanation. But the more, that dealers like Patterson, for example, they sell exclusively Sirona's products. And so if you're buying a 3D Panorex through Patterson, or you're buying a CEREC unit through Patterson, you're going to need somebody to help you out with the education, the installation, troubleshooting when things don't go right, repairs and stuff like that. And so I think that's something Amazon's never going to be able to touch. I don't know if you've ever had a rep in Phoenix for any of the dental distributors who was smarter than you were. I've been fortunate enough to have a couple reps like that. And there's nothing better than a rep who can come in and tell you, when you say, what's everyone else using to put their veneers on? And he tells you, Variolink aesthetic, and here's why. They like this shading system where instead of the Vita shades, it starts with the translucent, and then you have these warm and cool shades. When you have a rep that knows that much and can help you, or when you have a rep where you can tell him that you're having problems, with your class 2 composites with the contacts, and he can explain to you about a sectional matrix system and which ones he thinks is the best. I mean, that's a lot of kind of advice, and I think that's what we're going to see with reps of the future, is that the ones who really thrive are going to be the ones who it's more than just a job. They're very passionate about helping dentists. They want to find what you hate having on your schedule, what you hate doing on a weekly basis, and they want to teach you a way to do it better, show you a way and know and read journals and be up to stuff and know about high-tech equipment and whether or not you should switch. So I'm sure Amazon will get involved one day, but I think it's really just going to be for more commodity type consumables. And I think we're going to see that the distributors are going to almost force their reps to really become intelligent so they can offer some value to the dentist that you can't get just clicking through a website.
And they always know who to talk to. I mean, my rep, I'll ask a question. Sometimes she'll have a specialty rep come in. I had a guy in the other day, and I was asking about endo files. My God, he went to my grease board, and he knew every brand, every file, every shape, every geometry. I mean, I don't know any. I've never heard an Endodontist lecture like this. I mean, the guy only did one thing. He did endo files, and he was amazing. I mean, he was a freak. Yeah,
and you could have researched that all online, but it would have taken you 10, well, you couldn't have, but another dentist could have researched it online, and it would have taken him 5 times as long. But it's just nice to be, to be able to have somebody say that, especially when, like I remember placing my first implant, and that the rep was there from the implant company, and it's just, it's nice to be able to have somebody who, if you had a heart attack halfway through the procedure, that they could finish it up and probably get a better result than you.
Tarun Agarwal, who you and I love and respect and adore, he uses the most expensive implant system out there, Noble Biocare. And I've noticed that, the people who are just getting it done and doing lots of implants, and, 100, 200 a year, they always use a rep. It's always a rep-based relationship. And then the dentists who are always trying to save a dime and buying some implant from some country in the Eastern Hemisphere to save $4, they're not placing any, or they're placing 10 a year. So it's a matter of the ones that are successful are just getting her done. And when you're getting her done, you're using people in your backyard with reps, that just know the grapevine, know who you need to talk to.
Yeah, and I actually, with the newest upgrade to the CEREC software, the 4.4 software, I kind of thought of you, because I thought, this is something Howard, I think, would be really fascinated by. And the 4x4, the 4.4 software allows you to mill surgical guides in your office, for single unit implants. So you have to combine it with a cone beam, obviously, and a lot of the CEREC doctors use the Galileos, the one from Sirona. But I've seen T-Bone do these cases where you take an intraoral scan and you combine it with a cone beam, and it allows you to plan where the implant's going to be, where the abutment and the crown are going to be. And once you decide all that, CEREC makes a big block now that you can put in your mill, and you mill a surgical guide that's going to snap onto the adjacent teeth, and it's got that little metal sleeve to make sure that when you're doing the osteotomy, the burr doesn't go too deep or off at the wrong angle. And these guys are becoming completely self-sufficient now, where they can treatment plan an implant and then mill a surgical guide, place it on the second one, and then they can do this in 3 appointments now. And so this concept of a super kind of GP who is able to place their own implants but not having to freehand it. Surgical guides and implants, I think, are the only area of dentistry where, as a GP, you know that you could probably do a procedure as well, if not slightly better, than a specialist. Because if you're going to try to do an endodontic procedure on tooth number 2 or tooth number 15, I'm going to say the endodontist is going to do a better job every single time than a GP on a really tricky endo like that. Not tooth number 9.
Here's what we do. Here's what we do. We'll film a video, and we'll have you in operatory 1 doing a free-handed surgical placement of an implant, and then we'll have Stevie Wonder in room 2 using a surgical guide, and then we'll take CBCTs before and after and see who did it better. My God, that would be worth Stevie's honorarium, and I know where we could do it legally.
What'd be even funnier is the camera pulls back to show his, and he put the implant like into the drywall, into the wall, like missed the patient by 3 feet. It was actually in the wall.
Oh my God! So Mike, you lecture to so many dentists, you work with so many dentists, you have access to more data than anybody I know. What do you think are common dentist errors?
Well, certainly I'm familiar with common dentist errors when it comes to like crown and bridge, for 2 reasons. I used to make all those mistakes myself personally, and I assumed that the labs that I was sending the work to was the reason why the crowns didn't look very good. I never looked in the mirror to look at myself. And then once I got into the laboratory and practiced there for 15 years, it kind of became clear that, I'm not the only one struggling, with these things. I always tell the story about how I was in remedial operative while I was in dental school. And I always ask the crowd, I said, raise your hand if you were in remedial operative or remedial crown and bridge or endo, and no hands ever go up. And I'm like, see, you guys are already have a better set of hands than I do. There's no reason why you can't get better results. It really comes down to laziness, Howard. I mean, it really comes down to dentists who don't see the value in placing depth cuts, even though they know they need at least 1 millimeter for Emax. 1.5 would be ideal. And they won't use a depth cutter that's 1 millimeter or 1.5 millimeters. I mean, I remember a doctor where we didn't even have enough room for solid zirconia. And I called him up and I said, we need 0.6 of a millimeter for solid zirconia. And he said, I could have swore I gave you 0.6 of a millimeter of space. And I said, how'd you measure it? He said, I just eyeballed it. I was like, wow, good for you. Well, you're like the Terminator. You have like a micrometer, your retina, and you can now see 0.1 of a millimeter, through, just by holding the patient's cheek back. So it's kind of laziness, but the actual mistakes are, the first one is under reduction. I mean, there's never over reduction. It's never a problem. There's under reduction on a good, probably 75% of the preparations in one area or another. And so, you need at least 1 millimeter for Emax. And in the old days, between 2007 and 2009, if we got a prescription for an Emax crown that needs 1 millimeter of reduction, and there was only 0.8 of a millimeter, our only choice was cast gold. And the dentist was like, yeah, right, she's never going to do that. So we'd have to make a thinner Emax crown, and they break under a millimeter. Today, we could switch that doctor to solid zirconia, and they wouldn't have to worry. But you never know how much you reduce unless you place depth cuts. I mean, every time I get on a plane, Howard, I see the same thing you do. 2 old dudes who flew in Vietnam with gray hair, who've taken off and landed tens of thousands of times, using a checklist, before they take off for the 21,000th time. And I can't get a dentist to use a depth cutter, let alone a checklist. And if dentists were in charge of the aviation industry, there'd be planes falling out of the sky left and right because they'd be freehanding the landings and the takeoffs. And the reason Southwest never crashes is they never go anywhere it snows. So take that.
Is that true?
Well, that's part of it. That's the reason their on-time record's so good. Because they typically didn't fly a lot of places. They've expanded now, but I read an article about how most of the airports they flew in and out of in the Southwest, as they are named, didn't have the problems that they had in like some of the other areas. But now they're in Chicago and lots of other areas. So
Mike, what kind of prep are you like? And you like a shoulder? You like a shoulder with a bevel? What kind of shoulder do you like on Emax and Bruxer? And chairside, cam?
For solid zirconia, it'll tolerate a feather edge margin. Ideally, you'd have a chamfer, but it will tolerate a feather edge margin. So it'll work with almost anything. Like if you have a prep that's got a chamfer on 2/3 of it and then a feather edge on the lingual, solid zirconia will tolerate that feather edge margin, but then you're milling a thinner crown and there's always a chance it's going to chip, and it may not chip, but the chamfer margin is kind of the universal margin that works for everything. I mean, a chamfer works for cast gold too. It works for everything, and it's not overly aggressive. A shoulder, we really don't need anymore. We needed it when we were doing PFMs, and we wanted to make sure we had enough ceramic material to cover up that metal that was going all the way down to the margin. But Emax does not require a shoulder and just a chamfer with.
What about chairside CAD cam?
Well, same thing. I mean, it's the same margins whether or not you're prepping it for the lab or you're prepping it for chairside. The only difference is if you under prep a margin, if you do a feather edge margin on an Emax crown chairside, when you go to mill that, it's going to chip. And you're going to have to take that $30 Emax block that's just chipped, throw it away, take another $30 Emax block, put it in there, mill it again, it's going to chip again. And you're going to have to go back and fix that margin or fix it in the software to make it thicker. But that dentist who makes his own crown is going to become a better dentist because of that and start prepping better because he has to deal with his own circumstance. But if you do that same prep where it's got, it's an Emax crown, and it's got chamfer margins, but it's got a feather edge. In the laboratory, they're probably going to press that. They're going to use Emax press and a pressing oven because you can press to a thinner margin, then you can mill a thinner margin. So the lab kind of has a way out. But the chairside doctor learns very quickly that if they don't put a chamfer all the way around that, since their only option's milling, that it might chip at the margin and they'll lose another $30 block. And that's why those dentists end up being so good, is because they have to act as their own lab technician. And that's when you really learn what your preps and impressions are like, is when you're forced or you choose to be your own lab person. The amount of growth in your clinical skills when you make your own crowns is astronomical. There's no faster way to become a better dentist than to make your own crowns.
What are your thoughts on a shoulder margin? And polishing it with an end cutting burr. I mean, it was you 200 podcasts ago that told me how when you're doing an end cutting burr, that when you're doing the smoothing of a shoulder and you get like a little fuzz, what that looks like at 40x, that little, you know what I mean? And you and I both agree that when I got my Cerac, seeing that prep 40 times larger. I mean, the first time you saw that, you're just like, oh my God. I mean, seeing is everything. In fact, when I talked to an endodontist, what is the best way to improve your endo? He just says loops, microscope, just anything where you can see more, just visualization.
Yeah. And I remember when you scanned your first, prep with Cerac, because I could hear Jan laughing all the way here in California when she saw that blown up 40 times. She's like, see, I told you you're awful. Look at that. When I started doing that, I saw the same thing too. I would see that my lingual margin on my prep was here, up around the gingival level. And then the distal margin would come around, and where they would meet on the distal lingual line angle, they'd be off by, I don't know, like an inch, maybe not an inch, maybe like a millimeter, like two train tracks kind of missing each other. And you're like, oh my God. And it was such a common problem. It was like on every prep that I did. And that's how you learn what you're doing wrong. But I've never really used an end cutting burr. I mean, the burr that I use is it's a 60 micron red stripe 856 025 burr but it's
Did you find a burr with more numbers so these listeners could memorize it easier? Say that burr number again.
All diamonds have 6 numbers, Howard. It's not just this one. It's an 856025.
856025.
Or your listeners can just use a 3 round burr if they can only memorize a single digit.
Who makes this burr?
Everybody in the world makes it. It's an
Okay.
856025. It's just a shape and a diameter, and I use it the one with the red stripe on it, which are the 60 micron diamond particles, which is perfect for smoothing off the margin, because when you do take a digital impression and you blow it up, you see all the chips out of the margin that you could never see before just looking with your loops. By the way, I got to give a shout out to Oroscoptic and their new iZoom loops. I don't know if you've seen these before. I was up with Gordon when we saw them for the first time. But these are loops that you actually can twist and turn them. So they're a 3x loop, and then you turn it, and now they're 4x, and you turn it again, and they're 5x. And I used to wear, and still wear, 3.2 a lot of the times. But when you start seeing things with 5x, oh my God, it's a whole. Now, you couldn't prep the whole tooth like that because you have to hold so still, it's not practical. But to do those margins with the water off, with an electric handpiece down at 2,000 RPMs, with those 5x loops on is fantastic. And then you can just switch back to 3x to do the rest of the prep, or 4x to find a canal for an endo or whatever you want.
I have to wear a 4.5 just to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, to keep your self-confidence up.
I just to find it's a 4.5. I'm thinking about hanging a microscope above my toilet. Okay, cementation. Talk about that.
Cementation has, it's funny because with these new materials like solid zirconia and Emax, it's forcing us to think about cementation versus bonding in a different way. And what I mean by that is, for the first time ever, we have to take into consideration cutting these crowns off when we're trying to decide how to put them onto the tooth. I don't know if you've had the distinct pleasure of cutting off a solid zirconia crown.
Well, what goes around comes around. Remember 25 years ago when Thermofill came out and they were going to leave a carrier, and that made everybody start thinking, not every root canal lasts forever. And when everybody was starting to play with this, everybody was saying, well, what happens in a retreat? And so now here it is 30 years later, we're talking about crown materials, and cementation's gotten so good that we have to start thinking some of these crowns are going to have to be removed, and that is a bitch to remove these crowns.
All of these crowns are going to need to be removed unless the patient dies, sooner than expected. I mean, unless you're working on somebody who's really old and really sick. For the most part, everything's going to have to be redone, and you just have to assume it's going to have to be redone. And so when you go to cut through a solid zirconia crown, if you have the right burrs, like the ones, the Zircut, Z-I-R-C-U-T, Zircut burrs from Access Dental, or there's
Z-I-R-C-U-T?
Yeah, Zircut.
From where?
Access makes those, or Cybron Endo, I guess they're now. I think they're Kerr Rotary. I can't keep track. It's a little difficult sometimes with the
Kerr
Rotary, yeah.
And that's an Access Dental's division of Cybron Kerr?
They've changed names and rebranded a couple times, so I think it's Kerr Rotary now.
Isn't that right in your backyard?
Yeah, they're here. They're here in Southern California.
So what's next? Glidewell going to merge with Cybron Kerr and buy Danaher?
That could happen. We're hearing big things about a Dental Town merger.
Yep, we're going to merge with In-N-Out Burgers.
That's what I heard. And that's going to be your personal sponsor from now on for all the shows. So when you cut these off, if you use those burrs, and there's other companies too besides Access, there's like Clinician's Choice has a burr for cutting through zirconia called the Predator. Probably not the best name, but still a hey, doctor, your predators are here. It tends to empties out the waiting room when they hear the predators filing.
Where's Clinician Choice? That's back east, isn't that? Where's that at?
And north, Canadian.
It's where?
Canada.
Yeah, but which town in Canada?
Like Toronto, I think.
Is it Toronto?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, I just had dinner with
Pete Jordan. I was guessing.
Oh my God, George Friedman.
Yeah.
And his wife. So Clinician Choice burr to remove these zirconiums as well?
They make one as well. A lot of people do, and you'll see the word like Z in the title, or Zirc, or Zut. That's your clue that it's a zirconia optimized burr. It's a very fine grit for cutting through zirconia.
How
and email.
you would think a big coarse grit would cut through that better, but you're saying a
And
fine, that's counterintuitive, isn't it?
it is counterintuitive. When I went to cut the first one off, we were putting them on Glidewell patients, and I told them we're going to leave it there for 2 months. I'm going to cut it off, then I'll put another one on and leave it on. And they just shook their head and said, yes, okay, okay. And I realized, they read this sheet telling them what we were going to do. And I thought, we should probably translate this to their native language, but my Vietnamese is weak, so we left it in English. And they consented to let us do this. And when we went to cut the first few off, I used a coarse burr, and it just stripped the particles right off of the burr. And then I asked my assistant for a super coarse, and it did the same thing. Then I asked her for a coarse again, and it stripped them off. And I said, let me see another coarse. And she was like, really? And I was like, what else? She goes, try a medium. So I tried a medium. That actually put a dent in it. Then I went to a fine grit diamond, the one I was talking about smoothing the preps off with, and that did the best. And these are even finer grit diamonds that you'll see, like these Zircut ones from Axis. These are the finest grit diamonds we've seen in dentistry. So I actually use these now for occlusal adjustments on enamel. And it is counterintuitive, but you use it to cut off zirconia and Emax. But even once you cut through it with a good burr, if it's bonded into place, it's really difficult. It's even more difficult to get these crowns off versus if they're cemented. And so Gordon and I wanted to make a recommendation for the lectures and for the newsletter. And, we decided that the most reasonable position was cement everything you can and bond only when you need to. Because when it comes to taking these crowns off, like when your boys all graduate from dental school and take over for you, you don't want them having to cut through these really difficult crowns to get them off. And at least if they're cemented, they'll come off in 3 pieces instead of 13, or having to prep the whole lingual surface like it was some industrial strength enamel. So this is the first time we've kind of had to think about cementing versus bonding. Bonding's kind of always been better, like at least with the cool kids. But today, cementation is the way I absolutely lean, because when it comes to taking these crowns off, it's a bitch if they're bonded into place.
So what would you cement it with?
So my choices usually are, any cement will work with both of these materials, but I've used a bioactive cement from a Swedish company called Doxa, D-O-X-A. It's a cement called Ceramir, C-E-R-A-M-I-R, and it's a glass ionomer calcium aluminate cement, and it's really nice. It handles well. It's got a basic pH, and it's the only cement we've tested that has a natural bond to zirconia oxide. So it'll bond to like a Bruxer crown without the need for a zirconia primer to be placed on the inside of it, because it's a very hydrophilic cement, and zirconia oxide is very hydrophilic as well. And because it's calcium based, it starts to form the apatite crystal. It's not only on the tooth, but on the inside of the crown, and it gets part of its bond strength from that. It's kind of this whole new movement of bioactive materials in dentistry. It's the first kind of cement of its kind, and so easy to use and clean up that I've been using that for zirconia and Emax now for the last 4 years, almost exclusively, except for when I have to bond something into place. Then I'm going to use something like Multi-Link Automix from Ivoclar, which is a self-etching resin cement. And I'll tell you what, Howard, since I went to all self-etching for the most part, the only time I etch with acid anymore is like on maybe no prep veneers on enamel. But ever since I stopped etching dentin, my incidence of postoperative sensitivity has gone way down. Remember when we went to LVI and we were prepping veneers? And the instructors weren't happy just to have us prep into dentin. They weren't happy until we were in deep pink dentin. And they got really excited if we could bond to the pulp. This was like a whole reaction to being told in dental school that you couldn't do this. But it was kind of the dirty little secret of dentistry. In fact, you had your own dirty little secret. Well, you've got several dirty little secrets, but the one I'm referring to is where you had your amalgams taken out and had direct composites put in, and you were eating Motrin by the handful for 6 months. I remember you kept sending me pictures of your dark tarry stool saying, what's wrong with me? But
I had to make a decision. What was bothering me more, the diarrhea from the Motrin or my teeth aching? And it was amazing. And then 10 years later, they'd all cracked and broken, failed, and now I have all gold. What makes me mad about that era there is how many dentists were out there saying that if you had any sensitivity, you know, it was you didn't have a rubber dam, you over dried, it was too dry, it was too wet, it wasn't moist, and used tubeless red, and it was always you. Yet when I would go in their office and I would go up to the receptionist when they were working on a patient and say, and start looking at their schedule and then say, oh, okay, here's a patient, Miss Jones, called Miss Jones. Oh yeah, you had a bunch of composites done a week ago. Are you having any sensitivity? Because I you know, because I'm listening to their lecture that they, you know, they don't get any sensitivity. And like, oh my God, I've already called for a Vicodin refill twice. And it's like, how those guys would be calling in Vicodin for their patients and then lecturing in front of thousands of people saying, well, we don't get any sensitivity.
Right.
You know, it was just like, and that just separated a lot of the, there's nothing wrong with being humble. I mean, why not be humble? We're all humans. We're all just talking monkeys. You fall down, you make a mistake. Who was that implant guy? I was trying to think of the other name. He was a prosthodontist who taught implants. In his lecture, he would only show everything that failed. And he went on to Green Labs in Arkansas. He was a consultant for Green Labs.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know who that is, but even Gordon put out a DVD called My Biggest Failures, and then he did a part 2. And that's the only time we learn anything. And that was one of the awesome things about Dentaltown. That was one of the visions that you had that I didn't have. And when you asked me to get involved with Dentaltown in the beginning, I had to say no because you had practically bankrupted me on our first venture together. But still, that's been one of the amazing things about Dentaltown is people's willingness. We were ahead of our time, by the way, with Mac practice.
I know we thought there should be a Mac practice management.
And as it turns out, the Mac computers back then sucked. Now they're the coolest things around. So we should have been doing that now. But you know, Dentaltown allows you to share your failures in a somewhat anonymous way or completely anonymous way if you want to. But it always seemed like, you know, as judgmental as internet sniping can be sometimes, that people were willing to ask for help and show what was going on. And I remember you used to talk about your vision of this happening. And I was like, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's going to happen. And I was wrong. And it does happen. And it's true. It's an amazing way to really help doctors, to tell doctors what you did that worked, just reinforces what, you know, common knowledge or what people already knew. It's only with our failures that we learn, and we're only as sick as our secrets. And so until we start talking about these things and start saying, you know what, I've been doing a lot of these, and I just did 10, you know, veneers on somebody, and now 3 of them need endo. You know, what's going on? And I remember at LVI, there was a checklist. You kind of referred to it, and at the top it said, "Are you experiencing postoperative sensitivity? If so, please take a look at the 21 things below." And then it listed all these things. And I was like, why are we doing something? There was a list of 21 things that can go wrong and you can end up with postoperative sensitivity. I want to do dentistry where there's a list of one thing.
And you know, the only person that was on Dentaltown that listened to that was actually Clearfield SC they were listening all the way from Japan.
Right.
And I remember one of those guys asking me in the earliest days of Dentaltown, saying saying to me, he goes, it sounds like, you know, reading Dentaltown that sensitivity is the issue. I said, yeah, absolutely. And he's just like, okay. He said, it's the chairside chemistry set that
Right.
could be fixed. And then when everyone else is saying, well, we don't get any sensitivity, just you people over drying, under drying, you know, it's all you. And then the Japanese just slowly come with their self-etching and frickin' took what, 2/3 of the whole direct bonding agency just because they were humble and listened.
Right.
And by the way, on Dentaltown, a lot of dentists always say that you shouldn't be able to critique someone's work if you're anonymous, and they don't like anonymous. They think everybody should say who they are. The problem with that is, if I got rid of, first of all, you all register with me, so I know who everyone is, and I ping the emails regularly. And once your email doesn't work, you no longer have access to your Dentaltown. I know who every member is. I have one full-time employee that just does that. But the reason I maintain anonymous is that there has to be a place to ask a stupid question. And if we take that away from dentistry, and some kid's got a question, he's like, because, you know, you've lectured 1,000 times, are there any questions? No. Okay, well, let's take a break. And then 20 people run up to you and ask you, you know, this special private question that everybody in the room has. And then we have a report abuse, and we play baseball, 3 strikes and you're out. If you know, it's okay to say, why did you do this? Or I would have done this. But if you make someone feel bad and someone reports abuse, and we get 3 of these on you, you're out. And we ban someone every week.
Right.
And with 204,000 members, we don't need cyber bullies. I mean,
Right.
everybody's beating us up. Insurance. By the way, Sirona, if they want to be a hit, I've done my market research on Sirona. You know how they're making, they replaced the lab man with a CAD cam. Well, as soon as they can replace the dental assistant with a droid, oh my God, everybody's going to buy that. I mean, they could charge 200,000. Could you imagine walking in there and all your staff was droids?
Well, here's what I want to do.
Just kidding.
I want to. This is another
I'm just
idea for
kidding.
them. That's big. I know you. I know you're not gonna. I know your staff's gonna hear that and not be happy with being replaced by droids. But
I've thrown Jan under the bus on so many jokes for 28 years. She just rolls her eyes and laughs. She actually giggles
exactly.
out loud.
She knows. Yeah, she knows how lucky you are to have her there. But I think that if every CEREC unit that was sold came with a dental lab technician duct taped to the side of it, somebody who was going to design the crowns, mill the crowns, stain and glaze the crowns, that everybody would hop on this technology much sooner. Because I think that's their fear is, me and my staff don't know how to design. We're afraid that our crowns aren't going to look any good. And I think if you could just take lab technicians and kidnap them from another country and duct tape one to the side of the machine, that you'd have a large step forward towards getting people to implement it if this thing basically just turned out a crown that was finished. And so a lot of times doctors will tell me, well, that's why I don't want to get involved with chairside CAD/CAM. But I always remind them, at Glidewell, we used to hire 15 people every Monday. Every single Monday, there was like a new employee orientation with 15 people. Now, half of them probably wouldn't be there in a year because they didn't like working with their hands, as it turns out, or whatever happened. But we would hire people off the streets who would become crown designers. They knew nothing about dentistry. They had maybe played a couple video games growing up. And within 3 months, they would be designing 40 crowns a day. And by the 100th one that they did, they would be considered to be not a master, but very proficient at that skill. And it's even easier with stainers and glazers. We just hire people off the street and we can teach them. By the time they've done 50, they know how to stain and glaze crowns, and they might do 80 to 100 crowns a day. So when a dentist tells me that his dental assistant with 8 or 9 years of experience can't learn how to do this, I'm like, are you kidding me? We used to hire people off the street who sometimes didn't even speak English, and we would have them doing
Sometimes?
it
Sometimes?
within a couple weeks. And so don't tell me your assistant can't do it, but if you only have her do, one a week, yes, that's going to be a very slow learning curve, but that's not how it should be.
Mike, when you got a high aesthetic case in there, when we're talking a woman, high lip line, and you're doing an anterior, chair side CAD/CAM, and you stain and glaze that. I mean, is that stain and glaze really going to be there in 5 years? I mean, is that more of a temporary solution that's going to make it look pretty for a year or two? But I mean, with Diet Coke and Dr. Pepper, is that really going to be there? That's chairside stain and glaze in 5 years?
It's going to be there as long as the laboratory stain and glaze is going to be there. It's not done any differently in the lab. It's stained and glazed exactly the same way.
But how long is
no one knows. I've asked Gordon and Rella that so many times, and you never know. I feel like I've seen PFMs before where the stain and glaze. Like, you ever see those patients who come in and the central incisor has a crown. It's like a B0. It looks like a toilet bowl. And they go, this used to match 30 years ago. And you're like, yeah, whatever. You're like, your vision's pretty awful. I dare you to bring me a picture that shows me that. But then I started thinking that might be the stain and glaze coming off of there. But usually those are 20 years old or something like that. We haven't seen it in the EMAX, that stain and glaze that we put in 7 years ago, 8 years ago. So I don't know. That might happen after 15 years, but I can tell you that the staining and glazing done chairside is exactly the same as what's done in the laboratory. There's a lot of dentists, though, who get CEREC units and they're afraid or don't want to do those anterior restorations. And I think that's still a great time to use your lab. In fact, I think the dental lab of the future is going to look a lot like an endodontist or an oral surgeon, where a GP is going to do the easy endo, take out the easy teeth and send the difficult ones to the specialist. And I fully see the world going to the point where dentists are making their posterior crowns in their office, which according to Delta are 80% of the crowns done in any given year are posterior teeth. The dentist does all the posterior crowns in the office, and for the anterior ones or the bridges, scans it, sends it to the dental laboratory, and lets the experts in aesthetics make those anterior crowns for them. So I don't think the dental labs will ever go away. I just think they're going to become more like a specialist where they do the special cases.
And when you say specialist, you mean all but orthodontists, because all specialists like endodontists, they assume you're going to do the easy anteriors and send the retreat molars. Oral surgeons, they assume you're going to pull the easy gum disease and pull the wisdom teeth. But I swear to God, orthodontists, if you do just like one mild tooth movement, your orthodontist has to go to the hospital for an EKG and a stroke. And I mean,
Right.
the orthodontists are the only ones that are completely irrational. I mean, they don't let any non-orthodontist go to their meeting. They don't want anybody to do the most simplest routine case. I mean, they're just they're freaks, aren't they?
Well, I'm in enough hot water with orthodontists from some comments I made early in this year in our magazine. So I'm gonna let you.
But they're not moderate. And what I see is, I got 4 boys, 20, 22, 24, 26, and them and all their friends, they, at that age you see the world black, white, left, right, up, down, binomial thinking. And then by the time you're 50, 60, 70, all the smart people have just turned into be really moderate, humble. It's like when you buy a chairside CAD cam. I mean, the freaks stop using labs. It's like, dude, are you the ones that are the most bizarre are the ones that are quote metal free. It's like, do you drive metal free cars? Do you fly metal free airplanes? How do you place metal free implants? And they're literally trying to make ceramic implants for these freaks, which when they break surgically, you have a nightmare to remove a broken glass implant. And I mean, so you just got to be humble and moderate, and nothing's black and white, nothing's easy.
Now I'm embarrassed to tell you that I have a metal-free dental chair. I just have the patient sit on one of those beanbag chairs. That's pretty much what we're using. But to your point, I think it starts in dental school. Because at the University of the Pacific, when I went, we had a solid ortho education that lasted all of about 13 minutes.
Yeah, but
and it was just too short. And so you and I had to go take, Rick Litt's course and Brock Rondeau's course and go get up to speed, because you don't have to do many veneers before you realize that when tooth position is the problem, tooth movement is the answer. Not a handpiece to remove all of somebody's enamel. It's the ultimate cosmetic treatment. And that's why I like to see here's another business that grew up on Dental Town is Ryan Swain, although he sold it now, 6-month smiles. I mean, the ability just to go in for an adult and in 6 months with a combination of IPR and arch wires, as opposed to removable aligners, which would take forever and don't quite work, like putting a bracket and an arch wire on a tooth. Just taking an adult and straightening out some front teeth to give them a nicer smile. Vince Koch, the very famous orthodontist who passed away a couple of years ago, used to say that in terms of orthodontics, kids should be treated idealistically and adults should be treated realistically. And
I love that. I love that.
I think 6-month smiles is a great example of that, to move around some front teeth. And if somebody's asymptomatic and they don't want to fix a crossbite and you don't want to fix a crossbite, but they want their teeth straighter, it's the ultimate in aesthetics is to move the teeth instead of taking the teeth apart and then putting veneers back onto those. I know you and I are just huge believers in that, and that's really kind of why we wish more GPs were involved.
Hey, can you email me that and any links? I always get a transcript of all my podcasts, because most of my listeners are all commuting to work and they're not writing anything down, but they'd love to have that quote. I know you told my son Ryan when you started you wanted a website link, and that post on your Sarah Gill was on powertobe.com.au product/DiTolla-program HTML. If you could email me those quotes and anything else you want to know, so that'd be good. Hey, Mike, I want to ask you a real serious question. These oral scanners, are they at a place in time right now to start replacing the good old-fashioned Impergum and your Pinovolley siloxanes and polyethers? I mean, are we there? Is it bleeding edge or leading edge? And part of the definition going from bleeding edge to leading edge, not only does it work faster, better, higher quality, lower cost, but I mean, the price of an Impergum is an oral scanner. Are we there at the same price? Are we there at the same quality? Where are we at on oral scanning?
Well, that's why, the whole category, digital impressioning, I don't like I don't like that term very much because when you say digital impression system, it encourages the dentist to just look at a digital impression and compare it with a polyvinyl siloxane impression. And when you compare those two today, the polyvinyl one, yes, is always faster. It's always easier because you can be a little hackier with polyvinyl than you could with the digital ones. You have to take better care of the tissue for a digital impression. And the quality, well, the digital impressions, you know, a couple percent better in terms of accuracy, but it's not like polyethers and polyvinyls are inaccurate. And it's more expensive with the digital. So if you just compare it impression to impression, no, you would never buy one, and that's why they haven't really caught fire. But my message is, if you look at the other 5 things that you can do with one of these units, 5 things that you can't do with anything else in dentistry, or if you can do it better with these. There's no single faster way to become a better clinical dentist than to get involved with this technology. The first one we've kind of already mentioned, but now we'll mention it in terms of digital impression. So even if you're not going to make crowns chairside and you're still going to send everything to your lab, with a digital impression system, when you scan it, when it comes up on the screen, you're no longer looking at an impression. You're not looking at a hole in polyvinyl and your brain's having to try to reconstruct what the stone model is going to look like. You're looking at the virtual model on the screen, and you can blow it up as big as you want. It's like loops on steroids. Loops are a joke when you compare it to this. So nothing else allows you to do this besides a digital scanner. The second thing you can do is for the dentists who, as I mentioned before, are too lazy or just not interested in placing depth cuts, after you scan your preparation, when you scan the bite, it will now tell you how much room you have between your opposing tooth and your prep. So if you're doing an Emax crown and there's an area where it's 0.85 millimeters between the prep and the opposing tooth, you need to take off another 0.15 millimeters somewhere. And this stops you from your assistant coming back with a crown that's almost worn through on this one spot and goes, look, I can almost see through the temp. And you say, make another one. And all 5 of the next ones look the same because the tooth is under reduced. Another amazing thing that you can do is that if you get a bubble or you have an area on a digital impression where maybe there's a little spot of blood or the tissue was touching the tooth, wherever that spot is on the tooth, you can go in and clean that up or remove the tissue with the diode laser, and then you just circle that area on the impression and go rescan it, and it'll merge it right in. So with digital impressions, we have repairable impressions for the first time in dentistry. Most of the time we see dentists take a polyvinyl or a polyether, get a bubble, they just squirt more material and stick it back in the mouth. It doesn't work that way. You can't just keep sticking it back in the mouth. So especially on bigger impressions, if we have 4 or 5 different preps, now if we get a bubble in one area, we're kind of screwed with a polyvinyl one, but in digital, you can retake that one area and stitch it in. The other amazing thing, and this is probably the most amazing thing, is that this is officially going to come out as a product from Sirona in the not too distant future, but you can do it with WebEx or Go to My PC, any of these desktop sharing programs, is you can actually share your desktop with your laboratory technician who might be 2,000 miles away in another city. And so by sharing the desktop on the computer that's connected to the digital scanner, you can actually share the desktop. So your lab technician sitting 2,000 miles away, and on their big screen, they're seeing exactly what you're seeing through your camera. And so you can go through and say, how do these anterior preps look? Did I reduce enough for these Emax crowns? And they might say, no. Can you reduce a little on the mesial number 7 and the distal at 10? And just bring that facial incisal line angle back a little bit on 8 and 9. And all of a sudden, when you get your laboratory technician helping you to approve your preps, you get some great results because they can always tell how much room they need for these crowns. And then they can watch you do the digital impression. And they'll check off and say, yeah, that's great. Or, hey, you know what? Can you roll back the tooth number 8 and get just one more shot of the lingual there? Perfect. All right, send it to me. And so this is a degree of teamwork with our technicians that we've only dreamed about before. In fact, you had to have an in-office technician to have this kind of cooperation between the two. So it's an amazing amount of teamwork that'll let you be able to work with your
Are you talking about what Kevin Coachman from Brazil's doing? Christian Coachman from Brazil, his dental lab virtual world?
I don't know. I haven't seen him speak in a couple of years, so I'm not sure. But that's, yes, I mean, I would assume it's something along those lines. In fact, you can also have your lab design the Emax crowns for you, and then they can send you a screenshot of that so you can approve it before they come. We had this happen the other day where there was a dentist who prepped Emax crowns on 8 and 9, and there was a big diastema, and the technician closed it. and they came back because it turned out the patient wanted it open a little bit. So they opened it and sent the crowns back, and the patient said, I want it open wider. So the crowns came back again to make another one. And this could have all been avoided had the lab just sent a screenshot, where you could email it to the patient and say, is this what you had in mind? So it works kind of both ways. But having a lab tech check your preps, tell you if you're done, tell you if you need to do any other reduction is invaluable, and it leads to some incredible dentistry being done. So just to sum up, there's like 5 or 6 reasons there why these are such good.
Recap the 5 or 6 reasons.
The first one would be
quality.
Just being able to see a virtual model instead of looking into a whole of an impression. The second one would be blowing up your preps, like 35, 40x, and being able to see chips out of the margins and things that need to be repaired. The third one would be being able to see how much reduction you have between the prep and the opposing tooth to see if you need to do more or possibly reduce the opposing to get enough room clearance for the restoration. The fourth one would be like sharing the desktop with a remote dental technician so they could tell you if your preps needed anything else done before proceeding. They also get to see your impression while you do it and can help you with that at the same time, and so you get amazing feedback from that. And then some laboratories will give you like $20 off because you save them a ton of time if you send them a digital impression instead of a polyvinyl or polyether that needs to be.
Which labs do that? Which labs give you a discount?
Well, Glidewell started it, and now there's I know Dental Masters, Oral Arts. I mean, there's a bunch. There's a lot of them because you save them.
Can I steal you for an overtime question, or you got to run?
Go ahead.
My hour's up. Mike, this is a very serious question. I know I'm throwing you under a bus asking this because now you work for Sirona, but this is the most common question dental students ask me. They go, Howard, I graduated with $250,000 of student loans, maybe 300, some 400. I just opened up my office. Is it smart to buy a $75,000 BioLace, a $100,000 CBCT, and a $150,000 CAD cam when I'm already $400,000 in debt? I just bought a practice and I married a Catholic girl, so she's already pregnant with triplets. I mean, do you need these things that cost? I mean, you buy a laser, a CAD cam, and a CBCT, that's more money than your dental school debt. So is it going to be an investment? I mean, should a graduate with that much debt buy a $150,000 CEREC machine or use a lab until they get some of their debt down?
Well, that's hard to say. Do you absolutely need those things? Well, no. I mean, you and I did dentistry for many years without those things. I mean, and dentistry was done for generations before us without it. But when you start to see like 3D radiographs, for example, it's kind of tough to go back to 2D, the ones that you and I grew up with, when all of a sudden you can start to see why that patient's endo tooth, it's not hurting, but it's felt weird for the last 7 years, and you see this little, abscess over on the palatal or whatever.
My first X-ray was an Etch-a-Sketch. I just had 2 knobs and had to draw the tooth.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I always remember your example, and I use it all the time about an X-ray. Showing it to a patient is just so funny because you can always say things like, and as you can see on your root canal, I've left the gutta percha 6 millimeters out the apex because I really wanted to anchor the tooth into the bone. And they'll go, oh, thank you. Could you have gone 8? I could have, but I didn't want to push it. It doesn't matter what. You can just say anything, and they have to believe you, which is the sad part of all this is that they don't know how to judge it. But no, we know you don't have to do any of these things. It's really tough for me to say whether somebody $400,000 in debt should do that because I don't know who they owe the money to, if it's from the mob or from their parents or who it is. But there's such a great opportunity out there today that didn't exist when you and I graduated. And that is you could actually go to one of the DSOs, like my favorite one, Pacific Dental, just because they're from out here in Southern California.
Steve Thorne's a good guy.
They've got a CEREC machine in every one of their now like 520 practices. We just gave them an award last week from Sirona. They just did their 1 millionth in-office EMAX crown, same-day crown, so they crossed the 1 million barrier for that. And it's very impressive, Steve's commitment to technology in those practices. So if I was graduating, I think I would go and work like at a Pacific Dental and get a little experience, before I went out and bought a practice. I would go work there because they've got a ton of high-tech equipment in those practices and see if you like it or not. It's not a technology for everybody. And my goal with Sirona is to make it so that when you scan a tooth for an impression, that 98% of the time The proposal that it gives you for the crown doesn't need to be touched at all. And nothing would be better than if 30 minutes later it spit out a finished crown that looked almost as good as the labs and was ready to go in the mouth. That kind of simplicity. And so it's tough to say whether a new doctor, should write out of school or not. There's some who have, like Neil Patel, a guy who just jumped on it early and often. He's placing tons of implants now, and he's really made it work for him. But you'd have to, if you were going to invest in it, you would have to make sure that you're actually going to use this for all of its capability. So, the CEREC system not only does restorations chairside, but allows you to place your own implants, allows you to mill your own Emax abutments, custom abutments, and then allows you to mill the Emax crown that goes on top of it. You can now do orthodontics, send it to Clear Correct or send it to Invisalign, and a few of those cases will help make the payment every month. So if a dentist is going to use it, then absolutely, I think it's worthwhile. But if they're not sure, if they didn't get a chance to use a CAD/CAM product, and now there's Sirona products in I think 48 of the dental schools out there, so they might even get a chance in school to be able to use it. If they're really turned on and excited by it, then it's probably a good idea if they're going to use it to be productive. But if they're not sure, go try it out somewhere and see. You just got to find out for yourself if that's going to be something that's going to be worth it for you.
I try to give all those dental students my advice, and not very many of them take it. And that is, when they ask me that question, I say, just don't leave dental school till you marry one of the girls in the class, and then you won't even have to work, let alone a CAD/CAM. I mean, I look back, that was the dumbest mistake. I had a dozen to choose from. Every one of them would have been the best decision of my life. So if you got $400,000 in student loans, marry one of the girls in the class, and
have $800,000 in student loans. Oh wait, no, marry someone where their parents paid for school. That's
there you go. Find the girl in the class whose mom and dad paid for their dental school class.
Well, let's look up all those dentists that you could have married on Facebook right now and see how they turned out.
They're amazing. I actually follow them on the Facebook. But hey, Mike, seriously, man, you're a legend. You're an idol. I still think you're the funniest damn dentist that ever lectured. What you're doing a podcast on? What are you doing? You're doing a comedy on a podcast.
Well, yeah, it's not a comedy podcast. It's not really a dentistry podcast. Right. It's just kind of me and Josh Austin, a dentist from San Antonio, who we both write for Dental Economics, and we're friends. And we just started doing it. And there's some dentistry in it, but a lot of times it's just about what's going on in our lives. It might be personal stuff we're struggling with or whatever. Just and it's called Accidental Geniuses, because if we say anything intelligent, it wasn't on purpose. It should be the name of your biography, actually, Howard. Accidental.
Oh my God. So that's a dental point. Well, I see your deals where you guys are laying in a bed. I thought it was a joke or a deal. Have you seen?
Oh no, yeah, we actually recorded. We were both in Chicago for a. I was there to lecture, and he was there for like an ADA meeting, and so we got there was only one room left at the hotel. So we got the hotel, and I just thought it'd be fun too. So we started off by I told him he was going to have his own room, and then on the podcast I told him, you're staying here with me, and there's that one twin bed we both have to fit into, and so we just took a picture.
How do you spell his last name? Osten?
Close. Austin.
Austin. Oh, like Austin, Texas. Josh Austin. Well, tell him, is he your buddy? Tell him I want to podcast him.
All right. Yeah. Right. He'll do it. He's a good talker. He'll enjoy it. And let me just say as we go that I always considered you the funniest dentist in dentistry. And you want to talk about mentors. I realized early on that I wanted to have some of the energy, some of the passion, and some of the humor you did. And I'm sure you'll remember this, but you gave me permission to do it. I followed you around to 20 of your lectures, and 20 in a row. I just bought plane tickets and went to you, and I watched you lecture over and over and over and over 20 times to see what it was and get inspired. And finally, that kind of launched me on my way. So
the boys want to say hi to you. Here's two of the four. Here's Greg.
Hey, what's up, boys?
Can you see him?
I can. Well,
did you scoot down? So you got to see yourself right here.
There we go. Wow, so much better looking than Dad. That is just. Thank you, Judith.
Luckily, their mother was a very attractive woman and still is this day. Hey, love you like a brother, man. You're my number one best friend, role model, idol in dentistry. I think you're the funniest, smartest, energetic. I mean, I've heard you lecture more times than you've heard me. Thank you, Mike, for all that you do. Thank you for gracing me with another hour. And thanks for being my very first, when I started my podcast, The first guy on the podcast was Mike, the man DiTolla. And then we're coming up on 200. We thought, who better for our 200th podcast than the man?
And Ryan's already booked me for 400, 600, 800, and 1,000, by the way. So just so you know, I'm slotted in already for those big
Are you scheduled for any more Ironmans?
No, I've got yeah, I am. I've got a half Ironman next year. California one at the beginning of the year.
Half that don't even count.
I know. That's why I tell everybody who says I can't do an Ironman. I'm like, 4 words. Howard Farran did 2. There you go.
And I got my third one in 1 month.
Oh, you're doing Arizona again?
I do it every year. That was my goal. I'm going to do the Arizona. I think the successful people start their day with the biggest problem they have, and then they don't get to the small problems. And very unsuccessful people, they always start off with small stuff and emails, and they never get to the big thing of the day. So when I turned 50, I thought, the biggest problem you got, dude, is you're short, fat, bald. You eat out restaurants, and you have every vice known to man. So 7 days a week, 5 o'clock to 7, 5 o'clock to 7:30, 7 days a week is bike, swim, run. And I'll be doing my third Arizona Ironman in a month. And who turned me on to Ironman?
Bruce Jenner.
No,
it was me.
Actually, I heard of when you first were talking about you doing your Ironman. I just thought, you know what? I've never gone wrong following Mike DiTolla. I mean, he's always ahead of his time. He's a smart man. He's everything. I said, you know what? If Mike has got the time you're the busiest man I know. And it's like, if DiTolla has the time to do this type of training, so do I. And when I first started doing it, to have the alarm go off at 4:45, I mean, you could hear the profanity at the neighbor's house. I mean,
yeah, but the secret to getting up at 4:45 is go to bed at 8:45
exactly.
or 9:40. It's all 8 hours of sleep still. It just matters where do you put it.
And what I lost, I didn't realize, I was staying up watching Colbert Report or or these late night shows, but I never stop the 4:45 alarm for the 5 o'clock workout. So then after a month or 2 or 3 or 4, you just couldn't stay up at 11 o'clock. You couldn't stay up till 10 o'clock. And now at 9 o'clock, you're just starting to get delirious and you think, man, that alarm's going to come off fast. So yeah, it's all the same. But I'll tell you what, I think faster. You do it for mental health. I mean, it lowers your stress. And what I like about it in the morning is when you're out there, you get to plan your whole day. I mean, when you're swimming 157 laps, 3,850 meters in a swimming pool, which takes me about 1:49. You clear out all your thoughts. And then when you get out of the pool, you just run to your day and you say, I want to do this, then this, then this, then this, and this. And I mean, I just love it.
Yeah, in fact, that's why I wear a Garmin watch, like a 920 XT in the pool, because I have to glance down at it every once in a while during a set, because it is kind of meditative. They have those isolation tanks where you lay back into the water and they close the lid for you to meditate. But swimming's a lot like that, where there's no other sounds. You might just see the hot woman in the lane next to you, and that's kind of distracting you. But otherwise, you're alone with your thoughts. And I have a lot of great ideas in the pool and sometimes on those longer bike rides. I'm always in too much pain running to enjoy it, but that's running.
Yeah. But you know what? After 3 years, I actually like running now. I can't believe I can say that now. I actually like running now. I mean, I used to just cuss and mad and I hated it. But 3 years of running, I mean, I in fact, now when I run 13.1 miles, I don't even do a run unless it's 13.1 miles.
Right. Wow. Because I remember spending a lot of time with you before that. The only time I ever saw you run was to the fridge. I'd see you run in a commercial. You'd haul ass to the fridge and then grab whatever and the junk food and come back.
And it's so beautiful when you're out there and the sun's coming up over the desert and the mountains and the palm trees, and you start your bike ride or run or whatever, and no cars, no lights on. And then the city slowly comes alive. I mean, it's just the coolest damn thing in the world.
It's funny because every human craves sunsets. If they're on vacation, there's sunset. Sunrises are just as nice, and there's no one really up to kind of see those. And you're right, starting your day that early, there is something special about being there as that sun's coming up. There's nobody on the road. Things are just quiet. It's like I don't know. It's a great time to be up and doing that stuff. And
I also want to say that again, thank you personally, because when I thought of things like that, I was a busy guy. I mean, I lectured a lot. I had a full-time practice. I had 4 kids. I got a Dental Town magazine website, Ortho Town. I just didn't have time. And then when I saw you making the time, I thought, shit, DiTolla's busier than I am. If that guy can make the time, I can freaking make time. And it was you who made me think, dude, you have the time. You just got to prioritize it. And for
Right.
that,
Well,
I thank you so much.
congratulations. I'm incredibly proud that you did it. You did not grow up, as an athlete. I mean, you wrestled, but not an aerobic type athlete like that. And it is amazing. And I do use you as an example when people say, I can't do it. I'm like, well, Howard can, and he's running Dental Town, and he finds the time to do it, and it goes against his genetics almost to do it.
Yeah, and I want to say something else to a lot of people. Everybody always thinks they know everything, but I got two siblings that are over 350. Two of them. I mean, I see families. I was married to a family where they all ate as Butterfingers and everybody had a six pack. And then I come from a family where everybody's been on a diet their whole life and they're huge. So genetics has some role. If someone just says there's no genetical variants, then you're an idiot. But again, I never compare myself or my Ironman time to someone like you. I compare my Ironman time to what mine was the year before, and I know this. If I threw in the towel and completely gave up, I'd gain 100 pounds.
Really?
100. So I love it. It works for me. But hey,
well, have me back and we'll just talk like Ironman and exercise and nutrition and all that fun stuff. That'd be good too.
Okay, well, you set up my son Ryan. Ryan, he wants to come back and just do one on nutrition, and what we'll do is we'll mark it. I'll be the before picture and he'll be the after picture.
You always like to say that, don't you?
All right, love you, brother. Talk to you later. By the way, one last thing. Get my cat. I'm talking to him the whole time. Bring my cat. Bring my Mimi over here. Is my Mimi over there? I'm sitting there. Here's two bald dentists in their 50s talking to each other. I see your cat deal. And I figure you must have an ugly cat because I brought my cat out.
Oh, wow.
And your cat's so ugly, I noticed you've hidden it during the whole podcast.
No, why is your cat awake right now? My cat's been asleep for the last 4 hours and hasn't moved. What kind of, you giving it caffeine? What are you giving that poor thing?
That's Mimi. We got Mimi and Tigger. But
where'd you get the cats from?
From Ryan.
he
brought him home from college.
Oh, see, because we got ours from a shelter, and she'd been in the shelter for 5 years, and it took her a year to really kind of fall in love with us. But even now, she doesn't like to be picked up. She'd claw me to death if I tried to pick her up and do that.
Yeah, but
I'll sedate her first and then pick her up.
Yeah,
like a lot of my dates. All right, Howard. Thanks so much.
Thanks, buddy.
Next time.
Bye.